If relationships are the real currency in life, if referrals are the lifeblood of business, how do we, the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, compete in this ever-changing, fast-paced world? How do we become more so we can attract more? My name is Curtis Lucy, and I'm your host. Those are the questions, and in this podcast, we will reveal the secrets. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Referral Secrets. We have Mr. Rob Chesnut here. He's the Chief Ethics Officer at Airbnb. He wrote the book called Intentional Integrity. And to get started, well, first of all, thank you so much for hopping on here and sharing your wisdom around this topic, something that is so needed in so many companies. So do you mind sharing the science of integrity to kind of kick this off?
Sure. It's interesting. I didn't know when I started writing the book much about the science behind this, but there are people that study this. There's a guy at Duke University by the name of Dan Ariely, and I went and spent some time with him. It's interesting. Before I met Dan, I was a federal prosecutor back in my early days, and I thought that there were good people and bad people, right? There were people that had integrity and people that don't have integrity. And all you got to do is you kind of figure out who's got integrity. And those are the people you want to hire and work. Those are the people you want to deal with. Dan taught me that it's a lot more complicated than that. I think all of us face integrity challenges every day. And, when he talked to me about that, it really resonated with me. We all face integrity issues. And I think we're all tempted when we face these issues to resolve them in a way that's favorable to us, right? We all want to come up with an answer that works well for us. The key is, can we come up with that answer and still feel good about ourselves? And a lot of times what ends up happening is, can you rationalize your behavior? Can you tell yourself and talk yourself into it? Because, Curtis, we all want to feel good about ourselves. At base, that's what science really tells us. We all want to feel good about ourselves. And can we do the particular action that we're debating and still feel good about it? That's why I think companies where there are a lot of creative people actually have a lot of challenges with integrity, more than usual, because people who are creative are really good at coming up with rationalizations for why their behavior is okay. So, the science behind integrity really is, we are deeply influenced by our own desire to feel good about ourselves. And we're also really influenced by our immediate surroundings. So what do I mean by that? If we see that our boss, for example, is not acting with integrity, is doing things that we know are wrong, it becomes much easier for us to do it too. But if we are in an environment where others are acting with integrity, and where doing the right thing is encouraged, then that feeds the integrity inside of us. We can't, therefore, act in a dishonest way and still feel good about ourselves, because everyone around us values integrity. So integrity is influenced quite a bit by our surroundings. Integrity is contagious, but so is a lack of integrity.
So tell us some more about intentional integrity, a term that I believe that you coined.
Yeah. Intentional integrity is just this idea that if you want integrity, you need to be intentional about it. And so many companies aren't. So, let's think for a little bit about how companies look at integrity. They've got a code of ethics. But the code of ethics is usually something that they got from their law firm, right? Or worse, they went online and they found somebody else's code of ethics, right? They copied it, then they put their own logo up at the top, and then they email it out to everybody and say, check a box. Check this box saying that you've read it, right? What's the irony, right, of stealing a code of ethics from somebody else? The truth is, that stuff doesn't really impact cultures, because everybody knows that you're just literally checking a box and covering yourself and trying to take care of a legal requirement for the lawyers. What else do you see? Well, you've got those compliance posters. in the break room, right? Everybody who's listening right now, you know the one I'm talking about, right? It's off in the corner by the pipes that are dripping. It's a little bit dark over there, and the font on these things is tiny. It's like 3 or 4 point font. You've got to practically have your nose touching the poster before you can read it, right? And it's got everything you need to know in there about following the law. The problem is, have you ever seen anybody actually standing in front of that poster reading it? No one reads those posters. Um, so then there's the sexual harassment video, another great example, right? Everybody, right? Curtis, you're laughing there. The email goes out. Everybody, we need to watch. Everybody's got to watch this video. It's required by law, and then it's created by some third party, and everybody clicks, and just gets through it. If you want to make an impact on a company's culture and you want to drive integrity into a culture, these things don't work. Because bottom line, Chris, you can't outsource integrity.
I love that.
You can't outsource integrity. Integrity is something that has to be a fundamental job requirement of a leader in a company. And that means you've actually got to talk about it. You've actually got to talk about doing the right thing. You've got to demonstrate it with your own behavior. You can't depend on a third-party poster, some other code of ethics, and somebody else's video to do it. You've got to step up and own it. When you do, because integrity is contagious, it will have an impact on those around you. But too often, Curtis, it becomes integrity is that topic nobody talks about. It's uncomfortable, right? I think maybe some leaders are afraid to talk about it because people are going to say, hey, what are you talking about integrity for? I've seen you do this, because none of us are perfect. But integrity isn't perfection. If it were, then no one would have integrity. Integrity is about committing to a journey intentionally to do the right thing, right? It's about talking to others about that journey. And it's about having the self-awareness to realize that maybe you get off track. And if something gets off track, you've got to candidly face it, admit that you got off track and made a mistake, and get back on the behavior again that you know is the right thing to do. But without intentionality, it's a very difficult path. It becomes silence. And, silence and ambiguity are the enemies of integrity, right? Where no one talks about integrity, that's where everyone's free to interpret for themselves what integrity means. And that's when you get the rationalizations, and that's where you get the problems.
And so, if a company that's growing and they want to be that company that attracts customers, the company that everybody wants to be, people want to be a part of, and obviously one or two little slip ups can really damage a company. What are some of the things that you've seen? And then do you mind sharing what kind of campaign or what things did they create around it to be able to help come out on the other end, a better company?
Well, everybody's got integrity challenges. And the more successful you are as a company, the more the world gets out its microscope and starts examining your behavior, right? And they'll come after you. I remember, Curtis, back when I started in the internet days, back in the early days, I was an early employee at eBay. Everybody loved the internet, right? Everybody thought the internet companies were the darling of the world. They were going to save the world. Well, after a while, people get tired of writing the nice things and they start looking at it more critically. And now the knives are out, right? Now tech companies are the root of all evil, and they are being constantly, I think, examined. In many cases, by the way, rightly so. I can look back over my career. There have been a number of instances. One stands out to me was when I was at Airbnb as their general counsel. I had been at the company for about a month, and things started popping up online about discrimination, about hosts that were discriminating and not accepting guests because of the color of their skin. The people were being turned down when they tried to book a room. And, it gained momentum. There was a hashtag Airbnb while black. And, it was painful, a painful episode for the company. And, as the lawyer, I trot off to be the good lawyer, and I go off and do my research on, well, what's the law around this, right? Does an Airbnb host, can they accept whoever they want in their home? Does the law cover Airbnb hosts? And by the way, what is Airbnb's legal responsibility? Because the lawsuits started coming in. Is Airbnb legally responsible if some of its hosts discriminate, even against Airbnb rules? And I get all my material together and I go in to have a meeting with Brian Chesky, who's the founder, CEO of Airbnb. And I start going through the law with him. And Brian holds up his hand and says, "Stop. I don't care." I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't care?" And he said, "Rob, Airbnb's mission is to connect people as human beings, to help people get out from behind computers, go to places they've never seen, meet people that they've never met, and get to know others in a human way." He said, we're about belonging. And if this sort of thing is happening on our platform, we're failing as a company. We're simply failing. And he said, so I don't really care what the law is, because regardless of what the law says, we're going to fix it. We're going to take this on. And he said, I don't care what it costs financially, because ultimately our mission is what matters. And we're failing in our mission. So, what the company did was we embarked on a journey to change our product, to change the way that consumers interacted with the site, to reduce or as best we could eliminate discrimination on the platform. One thing we did, we required everyone who came to the site to agree not buried in a privacy policy, but right up front on a splash landing page, that they would treat everyone with respect and accept all, regardless of the color of skin, religion, nationality, or the like.
That's great.
This wasn't the law, by the way. It still isn't the law in a lot of places where Airbnb does business, but everyone around the globe who came to Airbnb had to accept this pledge. And if you didn't accept this pledge, Airbnb said, well, then I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to use our platform anymore. And, look, Airbnb lost a little over 1% of its users because of this. But, Brian said, I don't care. Because, ultimately we have to make decisions based upon our mission, doing what's right for our mission. And I think, by taking this tact, by the way, the lawsuits went away. And I think the world civil rights groups partnered with us, governments partnered with us. And I think we are on the right side of history and doing the right thing, even if the law might not require it. And I think that's one lesson I've really taken away. And I think it was a valuable one for us. And that is, the law is just the floor. You as a company, the world wants you to act with integrity. The world wants you to step up and do more than just the bare minimum. And I think that has served Airbnb well and will continue to serve the company well as it goes through its journeys.
What are a few things that leaders that are on call can do to start driving even more intentional integrity within their organizations?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't just, you interview a few people, the interviews always go great. You might find out who they
do you have integrity? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's an integrity issue in itself.
We'll ferret out all the bad guys if we'll make sure we ask an interview question about it, right? I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier. You like it or not, as a leader, you're a role model and everybody's watching you. Let me give you an example. A CEO that stomps around and says, we've got to hit this number no matter what. I don't care what it takes to get it done. Don't come back to me until you figured out a way to do this. We're going to figure out a way to hit this number. That's how companies like Volkswagen and Boeing and the like got off course, right? Because they got directives from leaders that they were supposed to do something, to hit a deadline, to hit a number, an emissions number, no matter what. The problem with it is when you say those sorts of things as a leader, people hear that you are to do whatever it takes, even if you cut ethical corners, right? Let me contrast that with a story that Ben Horowitz told me. Ben Horowitz, when he was a CEO, every quarter he would sit down with his CFO in person with the numbers, right? They got the numbers in front of them. They got the CFO. Ben would always look the CFO in the eye. This was part of his ritual. And he would say, is there anything in these numbers that makes you uncomfortable? Is there anything in here that could mislead people? Is there anything in here that you felt pressured to do? Because Ben would say, we might miss a number. Stock might go down. I might even lose my job. But I'm not going to go to jail. Right? So, you can't ever send a message as a leader that there's something more important than doing the right thing. So as a leader, what you've got to do, first of all, you've got to be willing to talk about integrity. You've got to stand up in front of the company and talk about what's your company's mission? What's the North Star? Why is your company good for the world? And you've got to make decisions consistent with that North Star. Profit is not the North Star, right? Profit is a byproduct of running a good business. It's a necessary product of running a business, but it can't be the fundamental basis for your decisions. That has to be your North Star. So when you talk about that North Star, you will inspire both your employees and your customers. And when you make decisions consistent with that North Star, right, that will actually inspire and drive your company forward. But what you can't do is you can't ignore it, remain silent, because integrity is part of your job description. And what you say and do, I used to tell people that as a leader, you are the thermostat for integrity, not the thermometer, right? A thermometer just takes the temperature of the room. A thermostat sets it. And by your words and your actions, you are setting that ethical thermostat, and you're creating an environment, a temperature where everyone in the company lives and works. That's on you. So what you got to do is just own that.
So, I mean, with the media and everything that's going on, highlighting companies seems like every single week, like you mentioned Boeing, and then there's Facebook and there's Twitter, there's a whole bunch of people that are under the microscope. I mean, it's like crazy. Like, what is going on? Is it the pressure, like you're saying, with hitting numbers? Like, what is going on?
Well, you know what? I'm going to take a step back. What's the purpose of a company? And, a number of years ago, there was a guy by the name of Milton Friedman. And Milton Friedman, along with a professor, came up with this notion of companies exist. They operate to drive shareholder value. And that's all that matters. Okay. So, and that actually became almost an ethical mandate. As a leader, you are only to be thinking about one thing, driving the shareholder value. What does that mean? That means drive the stock price up, right? And what a coincidence. What a coincidence. Who actually has a lot of stock? The leaders, right? So what Milton Friedman did, I think, was create an ethical justification, a rationalization for selfish behavior. Drive the stock price up, make yourself rich, and hey, everything's good. That's actually your moral imperative to do it. And if you've got to cut some ethical corners, if you've got to put some carbon into the air or pollute a stream, or you've got to close your eyes to, maybe the working conditions of your supplier on the other side of the world, that's not any of your responsibility. Your moral duty is to shareholders. Well, I think things like climate change, and by the way, a number of other matters, got people thinking, hey, wait a minute. Why are shareholders the only thing that matters? Now, certainly shareholders are important and should matter, but aren't there other important stakeholders that should be involved here? And I think the world started asking these questions. And the world started asking these questions as we became more connected, and complete visibility was really possible into the inner workings of companies. So I think all of us, Curtis, want to do good. We want to feel like when we go to work in the morning, we're doing something that's positive and having a positive impact. And I think a lot of people started looking at this and saying, hey, I don't feel good about what's going on in my workplace. And in the old days, they couldn't do anything about it. But now in the modern internet age, again, when I was growing up, Curtis, we had 3 news stations on television. Now everybody's their own news station. Everybody's got a blog. Everybody's a news person. Employees don't sit on their hands anymore. They talk to each other on Blind. They talk to each other on Slack. They blog, they tweet. If they don't like something, they'll walk out. And I think they're demanding something deeper than just this idea of shareholder value. And what the world has now evolved to, and by the way, this is something now accepted, at least in principle by businesses, is the rejection of shareholder value and the adoption of something called the stakeholder principles. In other words, companies have multiple stakeholders and need to make decisions by taking all of their stakeholders into account. Now, that means that, let's take Airbnb. Airbnb, of course, has its shareholders, but it's also got its employees, it's got its guests, its host, and Airbnb recognizes the communities where it operates are also stakeholders. And look, it means the leadership's more complicated. In the old days, all you have to do is just drive up that stock price and cash the checks. Well, now you got to be profitable, but you've also got to be thinking about all your stakeholders. But that's what the world is demanding, because the world really, I think, ultimately got tired of the selfish behavior of companies and the way that that selfish behavior was negatively impacting all of us.
Wow. And what are some things that you have seen within an organization that has blown things up? Like maybe a romantic relationship, or people turning side eyes to different things like that. Like you said before, addressing this stuff head on is super important from the leader.
Well, there are a number of things you can almost predict. Companies come to me and say, well, Rob, I want to be intentional. So I said, well, the first thing we should do is we should figure out where are the most likely problems. Let's take romantic relationships, right? How many times have you seen a headline where a CEO or a leader at a company has had their careers derailed, and a victim, by the way, an employee, a junior person at a company, has gone through hell over a romantic relationship with a senior person? So let's talk about intentionality. How do you prevent that kind of a problem? Well, I'll show you. I'll tell you the wrong way. The wrong way is the way the companies have been doing it for a long time, and that is in their code of ethics, they might say something like, "Don't engage in inappropriate relationships." Well, what does that mean, right? Yeah, that's exactly the kind of ambiguity that creates ethical issues, right? Don't engage in non-consensual relationships. Well, what's a non-consensual relationship? If you're a CEO and you propose something romantic to a junior person, that junior person is going to feel compelled, because I know what they're going to think, because I've talked to these people. They think, what happens if I say no, right? So it touches their career. So is it really consensual? So we've got to get away from that vagueness. So what we did at Airbnb, I walked into an executive team meeting. There were about a dozen of us that ran the company at E-staff. And I walked in one day and I talked about romantic relationships by senior leaders. And I pointed to a number of examples of how it really derailed companies. And I said, well, in light of this, I propose that the group of us, the 12 of us, we should agree that we will not engage in any romantic encounter of any kind with any employee, supplier, or vendor, even if it's quote unquote consensual. Nothing. And we should all agree to simply forego it, because it's going to cause nothing but problems. And it really can't be consensual. And there was silence in the room for a minute. One person said, oh, Rob, we're all married or in relationships anyway, so it really shouldn't matter. And I said, well, you're right. It shouldn't matter. But based on what I'm reading online, being married doesn't stop anybody. So let's talk about it. And we did. And then we went around the room and we all looked at each other in the eye. And each person said, I'm in. Okay. So that meant we could now go to the company and put in our code of ethics and say, executive team members will not engage in any romantic relationship of any kind with any employee, consensual or not. That's it. Now, I don't think we broke a lot of hearts in the company, to be honest with you. But what I think we did do, I think we sent a message that we're going to put the company's interest and mission first. And we're not going to put anybody in an uncomfortable position in the workplace because our employees really matter. And now, if anything like that were to happen with a senior leader at Airbnb, it would be quite easy to resolve because not only have you broken a rule, but you've broken your word to everyone else in the room, right? And I think because we went about it with such intentionality and we talked about it, we weren't ambiguous and we weren't silent, far less likely to have a problem.
Don't let it be the elephant in the room. Like you're saying, you obviously talk about it often and bring things up. Have your team be involved with the conversation.
Sure. Because we weren't going to you can't make a rule like that unless the senior leaders agree that they're going to follow it.
Yeah, true.
And you know, we would have little reminders every now and then. I would talk to the senior leaders from time to time, just a little reminder so that no one would forget about what our responsibilities are and what we agreed to. You know, that's intentionality and that's how you avoid problems.
So with all the pandemic going on right now, you updated some parts of your book, I understand. Do you mind sharing some of the intentional integrity along like this COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Sure. You know what? I think the pandemic poses special challenges simply because there's so much fear, Curtis. You know, people are worried about losing their jobs. They're dealing with relatives that may be sick and far away, or really the loss of family members and friends. And I think in an environment like this, leaders need to start by recognizing the fear and give straight talk. So let me give you an example of straight talk. You know, when the pandemic first hit at Airbnb, you know, business had been going great and then it tanked. Yeah. Well documented, the travel industry stopped. Right? And the CEO, Brian Chesnut, talked to the employees. Now, a lot of executives in this circumstance would be tempted to say things like, don't worry, we're all in this together, it's going to be fine. Maybe it won't be fine, right? Maybe you need to do a layoff. And if you've got to do a layoff, then you really weren't all in it together, were you? People want to know straight what's going on. So Brian came and said, here's what's happened to the business. Business has stopped. Obviously, we can't continue as a company to operate with thousands and thousands of employees around the world and no revenue. We may need to take some steps. And I don't know what all those steps are going to be yet, but we're discussing it actively. And I'm going to let you know as soon as we figure out what the right thing to do is. Mm-hmm. And Brian also started by all executives taking a substantial pay cut. Because as a leader, you can't expect others to sacrifice if you're not willing to sacrifice first. Like Adam Silver at the NBA, he's a leader I really admire. When the NBA got hit with the pandemic, first thing they did, Adam Silver took no pay. Leaders on Adam's team took a severe pay cut. And I'm very critical of companies where leaders lay off thousands and thousands of people and then continue to cash full paychecks and take bonuses. I think that's wrong. So you've got to lead by sacrificing first. You have to lead with straight talk, not happy talk. You have to communicate it on a regular basis because, you know, people are alone. People are isolated and there's a lot of fear. And the best way to address fear is with good, straight, honest communication about exactly what's going on. I think you also need to demonstrate empathy. If you can, right? I mean, obviously some companies aren't in a position to do that. Airbnb had to lay people off, but even the way you lay people off matters, right? When Airbnb did a layoff of a substantial chunk of its workforce, Airbnb was generous with its severance. It provided health benefits for a year, which was critical in the pandemic, right?
Wow.
Another thing that the company did, when people are let go at a company, what's the common thing to ask for? Right? Everybody wants, well, give me your badge and give me your computer. Well, the people, folks at Airbnb, we ask, well, why do we need to get their computers back? We can, from a security perspective, have them, wiped of our information remotely. But in a pandemic, these employees may need a computer at home. They may have no computer themselves, or they may only have one computer that's needed by a child who's doing remote school.
True.
So in order to help people, why do we need over 1,000 used computers at a time where we're cutting back? Why not let people keep their computers? So a little acts like that, I think, send a message that we care about people as human beings, even if we can't maintain the levels, the employee levels, because of the nature of the pandemic's impact on your business. So there's a few examples of things, but I think, as leaders, you've got to be thinking, again, not just about your shareholders. You need to be thinking about all of your stakeholders and what you can do for them, because my mom used to tell me, tough times really reveal character. Well, this reveals character in a company, and how you treat people, how you treat your stakeholders is something that will be long remembered after the pandemic is over.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. And you have a 6 C's process around culture and integrity. Do you mind sharing that?
Sure. Well, you know what? It's the 6 C's I think are useful when people come to me and say, well, Rob, how do I go about doing this? How do I go about driving integrity into the culture of my company? The book, I wrote the book basically to share what I had learned both at Airbnb and eBay, but also from a number of other leaders like Adam Silver, former Attorney General, Eric Holder, Reid Hoffman, and the like. So, the 6 C's are just a practical roadmap. And they start with things like, a code of ethics. But you need a code of ethics that's not just something that you've stolen online, but one that you create yourself, a custom code of ethics. And I talk in the book about how you put together a team of people, a diverse team, to help create one in your own company's words and language, one that reflects the values of different people. One common mistake is what I call the Moses syndrome, where one person goes off to the mountaintop and creates the code of ethics and then comes back down and says, here it is, here are the new rules, everybody. Everybody looks at ethics a little differently. We've all got our own background, our own culture, our own life experiences. And who am I to say that, my view on each ethical issue is the right one? You need to get broad buy-in and input. So, creating that custom code of ethics, I think, is a critical first step in that conversation about being intentional, again, about integrity in your company. Another one is you got to communicate it. A lot of companies take their code of ethics and they send it out and tell people to check a box in an email. But in reality, that doesn't send much of a message. So what we did at Airbnb was all employees had to go through orientation. We actually talked about the code of ethics in a separate session as part of orientation. And, when I first went to the orientation team and told them that I wanted to do this, they said, oh, Rob, come on. We want, you want to talk about ethics for an hour with new employees? We don't want to drive them away. And I said, no, I think we can do this in a way that will engage people. I said, I'll teach it myself, live and in person, no video, no third-party consultant, no mid-level HR person. As the general counsel. And they said, wow, you're going to do that as the general counsel? And I said, yeah. I said, I'd rather spend an hour every week preventing a problem than spending that same hour dealing with the problem down the line. And what a reception I got. It was new employees ranked it as the #1 orientation class out of all 25 classes.
Wow.
We talked specifically about ethical problems that employees had faced at Airbnb, everything from romantic relationships to excessive alcohol to gifts from vendors and the like. People love to learn from stories. So we talked about practical stories for an hour. And I would have people come up to me afterwards and say, Rob, I've never worked at a company where they actually talked about this stuff. And you have no idea what it means to have a leader at a company come in and actually talk about integrity the first week. It has a powerful impact. So,
and it must have been like easier for you to do, being that you know where Brian's heart is and where his mind is on the organization. I mean,
it would do no good for me to go in and talk about integrity if the other top leaders in the company weren't bought in, because then frankly, it's even worse, because then you look like a hypocrite, right? So you've got to get that sort of buy-in from all the leaders as part of creating that custom code of ethics, right? Another thing you've got to do is you've got to create a way where, people can report violations. And because, people, there's a lot of fear, Curtis, people don't want to be a whistleblower, right? Nobody wants to go to legal. And you have to understand that as a leader, you've got to make people feel welcome to talk about problems. It's got to be okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I see something over here that doesn't look quite right. Let's have that conversation. It's not good enough to have a hotline that people are going to be a little worried about using. You've got to really put out the welcome mat for it. I'll give you a small example of a way that a leader can put out the welcome mat and create an environment where people feel comfortable talking about problems. So at Airbnb, we had open desking, which meant, I had a standing desk in a room where there were, dozens of people all around. And I'm standing at my desk one day and somebody comes up to me who I don't know. He introduces himself. He's a mid-level IT manager. And he said, Rob, I couldn't help but notice when you left your desk a little while ago, you didn't log off your computer. You didn't close off your screen. You had your screen left open. Like, oh boy. So basically he kind of caught me, right, on a security violation. Now, I know what ran through my head, and I think it probably would run through most people's head, and that's defensiveness, right? Like, oh, come on. I just went to the restroom. I was gone for less than 5 minutes. There was nothing confidential on the screen. And, come on, give me a break, right? But fortunately, I didn't say that. I then thought about the next thing. I thought, how great is it that a mid-level manager would feel comfortable walking up to an executive team member and raising an issue like this, right? How great is that?
To you,
That's the kind of culture that you want. You want an environment where people feel like it's okay to say, I see something that's not right. And so, you know what? I looked at him and I said, you're absolutely right. I screwed up. And by the way, as the general counsel, I ought to be the one setting the example here. I really appreciate you bringing this to my attention. That took a lot of courage. Thank you. And then what we did, we have a little award that we would give out at Airbnb called an Integrity Yeti. These are Yeti water bottles, right? Nice. And we put the Airbnb logo on it with our integrity slogan. And we would give it out to somebody who had the courage to raise a question or make a good point related to integrity. So next time there was a big company gathering, I stood up and I told the story of my security violation. And I asked the young man who came up to me to stand up, and I gave him an Integrity Yeti in front of a large group of people. Everybody gave a huge round of applause. A year and a half later, he wrote me an email and told me that that was the most rewarding moment he had is in his entire 6-year career at Airbnb.
Wow.
$30 water bottle, right?
Wow.
But it's powerful when leaders recognize and reward behavior like that, as opposed to brushing it off, right? That's where things get buried, and that's where the fear comes. Okay?
You know, that's one of the things we talk about in Referral Secrets. Is behavior rewarded? Is behavior repeated? Right. So you're rewarding that behavior in front of everybody.
Everybody,
And
right?
like you're telling the story about yourself. I mean, that couldn't be more powerful.
$30, and I was able to drive a point home to a large audience of people. And that's, that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for ways to reinforce that behavior. Those are some examples of the 6 C's, of the types of things that you can do to drive this forward in a workplace.
Now we're getting up on 45 minutes here, and I'm going to wrap up in just a minute. And before we do you have any kind of parting wisdom for leaders of organizations, small or big? We covered a lot here, and you touched on a lot of different things. If you could leave somebody with some.
I'll leave you with this. I think when I was growing up, I heard that business is a dog-eat-dog world. No time for nice guys. The data actually shows something different, Curtis. It shows that companies that act with integrity, according to neutral standards, right, actually outperform their competitors and outperform the stock market, right? So what's really interesting is companies that think about doing the right thing, engage employees, attract employees, and also attract customers. We are in an age of conscious consumerism. Consumers want to do business with companies that they feel are trying to do the right thing and have values similar to their own. So, for those people that are thinking that, I'm here, I've got to make money. I've got to, that's my primary goal. My response is, yes, you do. And integrity is something that can actually be wind at your back. It can actually drive your business. And of course, it can prevent a catastrophic problem. So I think focusing on integrity is something that needs to be a fundamental part of your playbook as a leader.
And people can find your book on Amazon. I take it, right?
They can find it everywhere.
Everywhere.
Find bookstores everywhere, including Amazon. You can get it at Walmart, and Walmart.com has it. I love local bookstores. You can also find more information at www.intentionalintegrity.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I usually do post about integrity almost every day on LinkedIn, and would welcome you reaching out to me to continue the conversation.
And you also do consulting with other companies as well?
I do. I work with companies that genuinely want to drive integrity to their culture, and I work with them and help them out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. So much wisdom, so much here. And thank you so much for taking the time with all of us.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you. Hey there, it's Curtis again. If you have not downloaded the 7 most powerful referral secrets, hop on over to referralsecrets.com. It's free. That's simply referralsecrets.com. Also, we give away prizes every week to our subscribers. So make sure you click the subscribe button. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Referral Secrets.